Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today, we'll be looking at the word bearers in the next video in our How to Build a Legion series. We will cover off on 4 main areas. Firstly, how the box set supports the building of a word bearer's army. Secondly, how the Legion's special rules can be best taken advantage of on the table. Thirdly, how rites of war impact unit selection. And lastly, whether any Legion characters, warlord traits, or the advanced Legion reaction change the way you might build and play an army. Hopefully, this is useful not only to those interested in the word bearers, but for all Legion players, giving them an understanding of the concepts behind army building in Horus Heresy and an idea of what each Legion can bring to the table. I hope you enjoy. Just a quick note before we get into it, a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit those buttons down below. Word bearers, they're quite unique among the Legions in that they embrace demons of chaos in a way that no one else does, at least not in the early stages of the early to mid Heresy era. They're slinging corrupted psychic powers, they've got demon-warped marines wrecking face, they've got demons fighting along beside them, and they're just generally evil, which makes for some great characters, conversion potential, and narrative builds for your armies. So, let's get into it. Boxed set. The box set is great for a word bearer's army who want to take advantage of their leadership shenanigans and various upgrades by taking larger units. 40 Mark 6 word bearers, taken in 2 tactical squad units, each 20 strong, is a great basis for an army. I would upgrade each of these with dark channeling, giving them the corrupted unit subtype. This is a real game changer for the word bearers, and I'll quickly read them out. So dark channeling, essentially, units with traitor allegiance and the infantry or dreadnought unit type, as well as the word bearer special rule, can be given dark channeling for 25 points. They then gain the corrupted unit subtype. Now, models with the corrupted unit subtype are subject to the following rules and restrictions. All models with the corrupted unit subtype gain Fear 1 special rule. Any hits inflicted on them by force or psychic focus special powers gain the instant death special rule. Any unit composed entirely of models with corrupted unit subtype is immune to the effects of Fear special rule, automatically passes regroup tests, and cannot choose to fail a morale check due to our weapons are useless special rule. When a unit composed entirely of models with the corrupted unit subtype fails a morale check, it does not fall back as per the standard rules, but instead suffers D3 automatic wounds with no saves or damage mitigation rolls of any kind. No model that does not have the corrupted unit subtype or the demon unit type may join a unit that includes one or more models with the corrupted unit subtype. 2 things here. Fear, good. We've discussed that previously. Essentially, it's a bubble where you minus the enemy's leadership by 1. That comes into effect with lots of different ways with the word bearers that we'll get into later. And secondly, what is much spicier is the not failing morale checks piece and just taking a couple of wounds, D3 to be specific. Instead, this is so good, and that's why you want those big 20-unit tactical squads of the word bearers to soak up those wounds instead of falling back. So, these units are going to be super hard to shift, able to soak up wounds from the enemy instead of retreating. I'd be kitting this unit out with chain bayonets because, for the most part, word bearers want to be in assault with various buffs from a multitude of sources across the army. I'd honestly be interested in getting my hands on another 10 basic Marines, Mark 6 of course being cheap and easy to come by at the moment, to field as Legion Tactical Support Squads, or A Squad, with Warpfire Blasters. Now this is a word bearer's upgrade for plasma guns, which is just so much better. So it gives the weapon Assault 2, it gives it pinning, still keeps that 24-inch range, which is amazing at Assault 2, and it removes Get Hot. Yes please, I think these are fantastic. Now, when it comes to the Terminators, I can see myself using 5 of the Cataphracti, Terminators as a command squad, which is really tempting for word bearers if you're planning on taking their Primarch, Lorgar. This is because Lorgar, through the power of the word special rule, can give a command squad, and it's not just the Cataphracti ones here, he can do it for Tartarus and for just regular Legion command squads as well. He gives them Fearless and the Feel No Pain 4+ special rule, making them super, super tough. Now, you could get busy with some pretty awesome conversion work on these guys and make a particularly chaosy looking standard bearer if you're taking them as that command squad, which is really nice and always fun. The other 5 Cataphracti could then potentially support your tactical squads as they stomp their way up the battlefield. You could maybe give them an autocannon to lay down some covering fire, or possibly leave them at home if you don't have the points. Giving Lorgar and his command squad a Spartan to get them up the table seems like a pretty decent option, as there's not many other great ways to deliver a Primarch on foot. But Wordbearers are generally an expensive army points-wise, depending on how you build them out, and honestly, it all comes down to how many Gal Vorbak you're keen on. If the answer's lots, then you might not have the points for a Spartan. So the big old Spartan might not make it into all Wordbearers lists, but having it as an option is always handy. Wordbearers are big on close combat, and so are Dreadnoughts, so you may as well bring one along. Now you can either go down the Corrupted Light version and give it Dark Channeling for just 25 points to cause fear, or go full Corrupted and convert your box set Contemptor into a Maragal Dreadnought with the addition of some chaosy bits. I reckon I'd go down this path just for flavour, if nothing else. And to be clear, there are a lot of bonus stats and rules this Wordbearers Dreadnought gets. My advice would be to check out the 40k Hellbrute and see what bits you can use from that kit to Maragal your Dreadnought up. The Wordbearers have so many wonderful characters and Praetor miniatures that it almost seems a shame to use the Praetors out of the box set. I'd put these aside and check out Forge World for a suitably corrupted leader to take your force into battle against the Emperor's lapdogs. So, Praetors, not so much. Not going to use them. Now, with that covered, let's have a chat about the Wordbearers' special rules. The Wordbearers have plenty of unique rules going for them. We've already discussed Dark Channeling and their unique plasma weapons. Less interesting is their Legion special rule, which I think falls a bit flat, but it's not nothing, so let's have a look at it. The Legion special rule is called True Believers. It reads, a model with this special rule may never have its leadership characteristic modified below a value of 6. Furthermore, if one or more models with this special rule are part of a combat that results in a draw, then a side that includes one or more models at the end of the fight subphase with this special rule is counting as having won the combat by 1 point. Now, if they're both Wordbearers, then the combat remains a draw. So, that's that. Essentially, you're always going to be passing leadership checks or morale checks on 6, and if the combat's a draw, you win by 1. Now, this rule obviously benefits a close combat army, but I certainly wouldn't be building around it. Wordbearers' unique units and their characters are far more influential in list building than their Legion special rule. So let's take a quick look at these Wordbearer units. First up is the Gal Vorbak, or known in Cultus as the Blessed Sons. Now, these are Marines possessed by the creatures of the Warp. These guys continue to be fantastic from the last edition. They have amazing miniatures. Just quickly looking at their rules, essentially super tough Marines. They've got better movement, better weapon skill, better strength, better toughness. They've got 3 wounds. They've got initiative 5, 3 attacks each. Super tough. They've got rage 2, so they're getting 2 attacks on the charge. They're relentless, so they're firing their bolt spitters better, which are just kind of like bolters, but we think they're better. They look kind of the same at the moment. Don't know what that's about. We'll wait and see. Let's see. They come in units of 5, so they're that's 15 wounds in a unit right from the start. They've got feel no pain as well. They're really good. So that's the Gal Vorbak. Now, the next unit for the Wordbearers is the Ashen Circle Squad. Really interesting unit on the table. They've got both hand flamers and they've got these cool AP3 axes, which have shred. So nice. Now, for only 8 points more than an Assault Marine, you're getting a lot of extra stuff. You're getting, let's see, extra attacks. You're getting extra leadership here. You're getting melter bombs on your unit. What else we got? We got the hand flamer and that axe that we talked about before. They're stubborn, which is really nice. They have the Crusader special rule. There's extra stuff. I could keep going. I don't need to. Essentially, really great and beefed up assault squad is what we're looking at here. Better weapons, better stats, really nice unit. Now, these 2 units, combined with the Maragal Dreadnought we previously mentioned, and supported by various close combat buffs from a variety of sources, make for a very close combat focused army. You couldn't really go wrong with the box set and then just adding each one of these units as a starting point for an army, noting that your Elite Force Org slots are now filling up super fast. So chuck in a Wordbearer's character that suits your fancy, and you've just got yourself a decent army. But look, is one unit of Gal Vorbak really enough? No. The answer is no, it's not. Luckily, there's a Rite of War that has us covered, so let's have a look at them now. The Wordbearers have 2 very interesting Rites of War. There's the Dark Brethren and the Last of the Serrated Sun. We're going to start with Last of the Serrated Sun while we're on the topic of everyone's favourite half demons, half marines. The effects of this rite of war. So, Galvorback squads may be taken as troops. All of the Galvorback squads in a detachment using this rite of war can take Legion Dreadcore drop pods, hard to say, as a dedicated transport. And lastly, any unit that is made up entirely of infantry that has access to a Legion Rhino transport as a dedicated transport can instead take a Legion drop pod as a dedicated transport. That is really nice. Now the limitations here, you can't include any units with a movement characteristic of 0 except for your drop pods, or any units with the artillery unit subtype, sure. An army whose primary detachment is using this rite of war may not take an allied detachment. It cannot be used as an allied detachment, and any army that includes a detachment using this rite of war must have the traitor allegiance, and that is for both the Wordbearer's rite of war, I might add, because they're super evil guys. So what are the pros here? More Galvorback equals more awesomeness. Full stop, they're great. No more needs to be said. Now, being able to put them in a Dreadclaw drop pod as a dedicated transport, it's kind of cute, but with the high points cost and the inability to assault out of that drop pod, I think I'm going to skip that option. Now, the third part of the rite of war here, being able to take drop pods as dedicated transport for all infantry units that can take Legion Rhinos, is actually what gets me really interested here. It's particularly because this rite of war doesn't have the intense deployment and list building restrictions that the core drop pod assault rite of war has. It's really nice. So you can build quite a balanced army here, but still have some cool drop pod stuff happening with a bunch of different units that you might not otherwise. So if you're interested in taking half of your army in drop pods, but still having boots on the ground at the start of the game, this is a really nice rite of war, and Wordbearers will win quite a few fans from this alone. Cons, as we looked before, the no artillery restrictions doesn't really bother me. That's fine. Whatever. Who wants to take detachments? Detachments as well. I've got Galvorback to spend a lot of points on here. A fully kitted out squad is like 500 points. So you're not going to have the points to take detachments anyway. So that's absolutely fine. Limitations, not so bad. Now, what are the impacts? This is not a complex army to build. You take 2 to 3 units of Galvorback. Galvorback are great, and that you can still give them special weapons like melter guns, warp fire blasters, and more powerful close combat weapons like power fists and power axes in case you meet 2+ armor saves. In the end though, what these guys excel at is charging your basic 3+ marines. So except for maybe a couple of melter guns for that clutch rhino destruction before charging in, I'd leave the extra options at home. With movement 8 and initiative 5, not to mention a whole bunch of resilience, I don't think you need transports for these units, which is handy because they get pretty expensive. Now, to take advantage of the right's drop pod action and soften up units that your Galvorback may struggle with, I'd be looking at a couple of tactical support squads in drop pods armed with melter guns and warp fire blasters to drop down into my enemy's lines. I want to fill the rest of this army out with those units from the box set, and then you're pretty much good to go. Those tactical squads in particular are pretty vital, so you can hold objectives. The Spartan and the Terminators, you can maybe leave at home if you're running out of points. It's very unlikely you can fit Lorgar into this list, so when we're talking about who's going to lead this detachment, I'm looking straight at Argel Tal. He's almost 200 points cheaper than Lorgar, and he buffs the unit of Galvorback he joins. He's my premier option if you're doing Last of the Serrated Sun Rite of War. Plus his model is so nice. It is amazing. Once again, he's going to struggle against enemy with a 2+ armor save, so taking out those high toughness save units with your support squads is pretty vital. Now, if you're looking for a more balanced Wordbearer's force and one that is more likely to be able to fit Lorgar into its ranks, then the Dark Brethren may be the way to go. It reads, effects. Now, look, I take that back. I am not going to read through all of this. It's ridiculous. Essentially, you pick an enemy unit. If you destroy that unit, you get what's called a favor point, favor of the dark gods, if you will, point. And that gives you +1 strength, +1 movement, and +1 weapon skill to one of your units. You can stack that 3 times, or you can spread it across different units. Once you've destroyed that enemy unit, you then get to choose a different enemy unit to sacrifice, and you go again. You destroy it, you get another point. And that just repeats. Now, the limitations here, if you don't manage to do a wound or hull point of damage to that sacrifice unit that you've chosen for the enemy, you start taking Perils of the Warp for random units of yours in a turn. Lastly, it has to be traitors. So that's the gist. Feel free to go and check it out for yourself and read through it, but it is pretty wordy. So what are the pros here? Killing the enemy seems like something you want to do in games of Horus Heresy. Getting lasting buffs for it seems like a really nice bonus. Notably, you don't have to give the strength, movement, and weapon skill buff to the unit that killed the sacrifice unit. So I'm seeing scenarios where you choose a Rhino as your sacrificial unit of the enemies, you take it out with a heavy support squad armed with missile launchers, and then you hand off your favor of the Dark Gods, point to your unit of Ashen Circle or Galvor back who are about to charge into assault. Really nice. Works really nicely. Weapon skill is such a big deal in this edition of Horus Heresy, so this rule can really give you the edge in combat. Being able to stack it or spread it amongst different units is also really nice, and to be able to do what you need with it at the time. It's really flexible. Now the cons. If you don't manage to cause any damage, you're in trouble, but look, that seems kind of fair. No pact with the Dark Gods comes without risk, so I'm very okay with this, and I love the narrative of the rule. Being a traitor just makes sense. Don't even need to say that's a con. Now, what's the impact for the army? Pretty substantial here. So, essentially, you get to build this army any way you want, which is quite refreshing for a Legion Rite of War. There's no big restrictions on units or ones you particularly want to take. I think the key to this army will be making a balanced list that is able to remove enemy units in every turn of the game. Now, there's lots of ways you can do that, but I think some strong, long-range shooting will make sure you've earned yourself a couple points of favor in time for your close combat units to reach your opponent's lines. You also want to make sure you're going with quantity over quality in the way you build your units and this army. Expensive elite units who are already deleting whatever they charge will benefit far less from favor points than big 20-strong units of basic Marines. So, step 1. I think Lorgar and a command squad is a great way to start off this army build for this Rite of War. I'm tempted to actually run most of this army on foot, and in particular Lorgar and his command squad, as I don't want to be losing killing power by investing points into expensive transports that are busy moving forward and not shooting. The Spartan, great example. If you're moving that all the way forward, you're not shooting its ridiculous amounts of las cannon shots. So we're going to skip the land raiders in this situation. There doesn't seem to be a restriction on cataphracti terminators running in this edition, just restrictions around their sweeping advances, though please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that one. So you're not losing out on too much movement by going with the cataphracti as the command retinue option. The 4+ invulnerable save is probably going to be worth the 1 pip of movement you lose over Tartarus Terminators. It's going to cop a lot of firepower, this unit, with Lorgar and the Terminators, so having it with Fearless and Feel No Pain 4+ from Lorgar means it can soak up a bunch of hits. Next up, I want big units of basic Marines that are going to really benefit from that favor bonus. 20 strong units of Despoiler squads and Assault squads would be my preference here. As long as they can see Lorgar with his Sire of the Wordbearer's Warlord trait, letting them use his leadership, I'm not too stressed about them failing morale or pinning checks on their way across the table. I want to give these big units Dark Channeling and the Corrupted subtype, but at the same time, I think giving them Apothecary would be pretty good, and I think the Feel No Pain 5+ is going to really come in handy. It's a bit of a toss-up, you can really go either way, but I think you gain more from having an Apothecary in each of these big units than you do giving them Corrupted, especially as they're already getting leadership bonus from Lorgar. Now, if you're not taking Lorgar, and we talk about some of the other characters soon, going down the Corrupted route, probably the better way to go. Finally, it's going to be important to include some long-range firepower that I discussed before. Now, without any transports kicking around, I'm naturally drawn to infantry to fulfill this role to further diminish the enemy's anti-armor firepower. And you get a bit more bang for your buck in terms of raw shots from heavy support squads over tanks. Though the argument could just as equally be made to take a bunch of Predators, Vindicators, Sakarans, to draw that heavy firepower away from Lorgar and his command squad. Vehicles also let you take Searchlights and give you a bit more maneuverability when getting line of sight onto enemy units attempting to hide. If you do go down the infantry route though, I don't think you can just rely on long-range firepower due to the prevalence and impact of night fighting in this game, hence those Searchlights that I mentioned before. Luckily, the Warpfire Blasters we discussed have a 24-inch range and Assault 2, perfect for this role of deleting units in the midfield while still in those early turns of night fighting. I think I'd take 2 units of heavy support squads in this army, both with full 10 Marines if you can afford it points-wise, one kitted out entirely with las cannons, and the other with either missile launchers or maybe plasma cannons if you're drawn down that way. Noting that I'm pretty sure plasma cannons can be upgraded, I should say, with that Word Bearer's special plasma rule as well. Then I'd take a tactical support squad with those warpfire blasters. Now, this should ensure that you're racking up favor in turns 1 and 2 while softening up the enemy for those big charges of units that have just been benefited from the points you've earned. On top of these units, if you've got the points left, you can't go wrong with dreadnoughts and a bit more Galvor back. They're just so fun. It just doesn't seem like a Wordbearer's army without them. And there we have it. That is the Wordbearer's 2 Rites of War and respective army builds. Very different looking armies, but both geared towards getting into combat and chopping up your enemy. A reminder, however, to check out the core Rites of War to see if they better suit the army that you might want to build if neither of these sound that tempting to you. Now, let's look at Warlord traits, characters, and the Wordbearer's advanced reaction. The Wordbearer Warlord traits are predominantly focused on buffs to some close combat action, either for the Warlord himself or for units they've joined. Most interestingly is the unswerving devotion, I dare say, Warlord trait that lets you ignore the first morale or pinning check you fail each turn for units within 6 inches of your Warlord. Well, it's not that sexy or exciting. That kind of reliability is really tempting, and this would probably be my go-to if I'm not running a Wordbearer's character. We've already talked about Lorgar and Argol Tal, but the Wordbearers also have access to a bunch of other characters. So they've got Zaduleak, High Chaplain Erebus, and Corferon. Now, just quickly on Lorgar, before I get into those others, if you're going his transfigured form, he's gone full evil by this stage, he can actually fill out non-compulsory Force Org slots with units from the Ruinstorm Demon army list. I'm not going to speak to this any further, and I'm not going to talk about what that army might look like, as we don't currently have those rules. But having access to an entire other army list full of demony goodness within the same detachment has to be a pretty powerful option. So keep that in mind, and keep your eye out for when we finally get those demon rules. Erebus, the High Chaplain, for far less points, can select some demons of his own to include in a Wordbearer's army, though only 3 units, and they have to be either HQ or elite options. So poor man's option there, but if you want some demons, don't want to go full Lorgar, Erebus is your man. Now, if you've selected a Zaduleak, the Crimson Apostle, as your Warlord, then you're going to want to ensure you're bringing along units of Corrupted Infantry to give his +1 strength and +1 movement bonus to. The Dark Brethren we talked about before, I was pretty keen to give them Apothecaries, but if you're bringing Layak, I'd go with Corrupted, big units of Corrupted Infantry. The risk of suffering perils of the warp each turn, and that's part of his special rule, means that you're going to want to select cheap units to bless with this Cursed Gift, or units that have decent invulnerable saves to shrug the wounds off. Zadu could work very well, as I said, in that Dark Brethren Rite of War army, choosing the Corrupted option over the Apothecaries. Finally, a Corferon, the Priest King of Colchis. I love these titles. Corferon, he's kind of the budget option. He's doing some really cool stuff though. So he's cheap, he's only 125 points, and what he does is hand out pinning to enemy units around him like it's no one's business. So he gets to do a couple of things each turn, one of 2 I should say, and one of them is that to all enemy units within 12 inches, they have to take a pinning test. Now, naturally, you want to match him with fear-causing corrupted units, take advantage of the pinning on the charge without worrying about those pesky Overwatch reactions. Love it. There's some real synergy here. So I think if you're going down the budget option, you're not interested in Lorgar, chucking this guy into your Dark Brethren Rite of War could really be the way to go. Plus the strength bonus he might get from a Favor of the Dark Gods point or 2 would be really nice because he's only strength 3, not being a proper post-human, just one of those weaker ones done of grown men. So that's Corferon. I think he's really great. That pinning thing is really potentially powerful. I think pinning's super important in this edition, so have a good look at him. While the Wordbearer's advanced reaction may not necessarily impact army building, the ability to sacrifice a single model and then ignore the remainder of an enemy unit's shooting attack is going to be another nice tool to protect your infantry as they charge across the table into close combat. In particular, I like this for Lorgar and whatever retinue he's rolling with. It does, however, encourage bigger squads of weaker infantry, as sacrificing an Assault Marine hurts far less than sacrificing a Terminator or a Galvor back. So just keep that in mind. I think Wordbearers really gain a lot from having big units of cheaper Marines. And that brings us to the end of our Legion build for Wordbearers. Thank you so much for watching. How are you planning to build your Warbearers army? Are you going to go with Legion Rites of War or another direction entirely? Let us know in the comments below. Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.